All right, so welcome to Front Row's webinar on inquiry-based learning. I'm Sarah, a former high school math and chemistry teacher.
And I'm Amy, a former third grade teacher. Thank you guys so much for joining us this evening. As former teachers, we know it can be really hard to take time out of your day, and we really appreciate your support for our program.
And we also know that teachers are always searching for resources to help provide the highest quality instruction to their students. So we're really excited to share one of Front Row's newest products and the ideas behind inquiry-based learning with you. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to talk about how inquiry-based learning builds conceptual understanding. And this presentation will be broken up into 4 sections. If you have questions at all during the presentation, make sure to ask them in the chat room, and we will take some time to answer them after part 3 of the presentation and at the end as well. To access the chat room, just click on the chat bubble icon at the top of your screen and type your questions into the chat room. You can also tweet about the webinar throughout. The hashtag is at the bottom, Front Row Webinar. And if you do miss something, or just need to see the webinar again, it will be recorded and we will send you out the link. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. First, we're going to go over what inquiry-based learning is. It's a phrase that we hear thrown around in education all the time, but it's not always clearly defined, and it can be kind of intimidating to dive into the style of teaching. So what is it? We're going to first look at an example in order to learn what inquiry-based learning is. So the example that we're going to look at is finding the perimeter of a rectangle. So imagine you're teaching students how to find the perimeter of a rectangle. One of the problems they might be given might ask them to find the perimeter of this soccer field. And you can see the dimensions of the soccer field are provided with 40 yards for the width and a length of 60 yards. So in traditional learning, students are taught the formula for the perimeter first, then they're given the dimensions as they are here, and they're asked to solve the problem. So for example, here we would tell the students perimeter equals 2 times the length plus the width. We would give them the dimensions as you see, and we would just have them plug and chug the dimensions in to solve for the perimeter. This is traditional learning. It's also passive learning. It treats students like sponges where they're just given a formula to memorize and they just plug and chug, and there's no critical thinking involved in this. They might not really understand exactly why the perimeter formula is the way it is, and they're just using it because they know that gives them the correct answer. So if they learn the perimeter this way, they might be able to get a question like this right on a test. But then we have inquiry-based learning. So here's an example of how you could teach the same concept through inquiry-based learning. In inquiry-based learning, we would give students a real-world situation in which finding the perimeter helps them reach a bigger goal. So you can see here, the question we pose to them is that deer are coming at night and eating the grass of the soccer field. You are in charge of buying a fence to keep the field nice, and you are at the store purchasing materials for the fence. So we don't give them the formula for the perimeter. Instead, they're presented a problem, and they have to use prior knowledge to figure it out. So this is an example. This is active learning. It's no longer passive learning. They're not told the perimeter. They need to figure out the formula for perimeter themselves. And they're using their prior understanding that the fence is something that goes around the edges of the field. So we're not calling it the perimeter here. They know that a fence goes around the edges, and they can figure out using the length and width of the field what the perimeter might be. So students who learn the perimeter either of these 2 ways will probably be able to solve a new problem like this pretty easily. It's similar enough to the first problem that just memorizing the formula for perimeter, 2 times the length plus the width, would be enough for them to solve the problem. The value of inquiry-based learning, though, comes from questions like this one. Find the perimeter of this baseball field. So if they're trying to find the perimeter of a baseball field here, it clearly doesn't fit into the formula that they've learned, 2 times the length plus the width. But Since inquiry-based learning develops a conceptual understanding of what perimeter actually means, it allows students the ability to apply their knowledge in new and unexpected situations like this. So they would be able to realize that perimeter means edges, and they would have a better way to conceptualize and create and find the solution for themselves instead of just plugging and chugging into a meaningless formula. So inquiry-based learning then enhances the transfer of learning to real life, which makes it much more useful. So in summary, inquiry-based learning engages students with a problem that must be solved by using open-ended questions and prior knowledge to come to a conceptual of understanding of what is being taught. And the keys here are really that it engages students and it gives them a conceptual understanding. It's not just memorization. Inquiry-based learning is active learning, which is true learning. And I'm sure we've all heard the Confucius quote that says, "Tell me and I'll forget, show me and I may remember, and involve me and I'll understand." So inquiry-based learning is a method of learning that truly involves students so that they understand. They're not just being told something that they will later forget. So now that we have an idea of what inquiry-based learning is, and I know some of you may have known what it is before, so we'll get to how we use front rows inquiry-based lessons in a little bit. But first, a little more background on why inquiry-based learning is valuable. So this is a quote from an intensive study done by the University of Colorado Boulder that addresses the benefits of using inquiry-based learning. It says, inquiry-based learning courses were clearly beneficial for students' learning of mathematical knowledge, thinking, and problem solving. Inquiry-based learning classes also build up students' confidence, positive attitude, persistence, and their ability to work with other students. So we can see from this that inquiry-based learning is not only good for mathematical or academic knowledge, but also for the development of important character traits, which we'll get to in just a second here. And this quote is from the book Adding It Up, Helping Children Learn Mathematics, written by the Mathematics Learning Study Committee of the National Research Council, and it addresses the power of inquiry-based learning in deeper understanding and retention of the material being taught. It says, learning with understanding is more powerful than simply memorizing because the organization improves retention, promotes fluency, and facilitates learning-related material. So there's many studies that address the topic of connecting pieces of knowledge in order to enhance retention. But one particular study that I think is interesting is a study where they asked chess players to memorize chess pieces on a chessboard. And they found that these chess players were better able to remember the location of the chess pieces on the board when they were arranged in configurations that were meaningful chess patterns. So it's easier to remember one single meaningful pattern than it is to memorize a bunch of separate unrelated pieces. And that is exactly what inquiry-based learning does. It integrates students' prior knowledge and puts all these pieces together, giving students one way to connect everything and to easily retain the material. And along with understanding the new material better, students also develop meaningful character traits, which we will go through here. So inquiry-based learning builds skills such as confidence, so students see what they are able to accomplish themselves using their own prior knowledge, and they just feel so smart when they are able to figure out a problem without the teacher having told them the formula. Inquiry-based learning also develops leadership as students take ownership over their learning. Critical thinking is a huge one. Students must evaluate a situation and form a judgment about how to solve it without having clear guidelines. It also enhances collaboration in the classroom as students work together to solve problems. And because inquiry-based learning relies on prior knowledge, each group member might have a different perspective, have different experiences, and so each group member's input is extremely valuable, and they can put all their pieces of prior knowledge together. Inquiry-based learning also deepens understanding of the concept. So it's not just surface level memorization of a formula, as we talked about, but they really understand where the material comes from because they're figuring it out themselves. Inquiry-based learning also helps public speaking skills as students are explaining the concepts to their classmates and as they present their approach for solving the inquiry at the end of the class. Inquiry-based learning also enhances perseverance. So it might take students several attempts to come to a solution of the problem, but in doing so, they're really working on their perseverance. And then, of course, inquiry-based learning really gets students to ask questions about real-world situations that are engaging to them and promotes curiosity. So we've just gone through what inquiry-based learning is and why it's valuable. Next, we're going to go through how Front Row's inquiry-based lessons are structured and some examples of what the lessons are about. And just remember, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat room. Just click on the chat bubble icon at the top of your screen and we will get your questions answered shortly. Okay, so just a general overview of how Front Row's inquiry-based lessons work. Each of them are a 3 to 5 day learning experience, and they all have a similar structure. So the lesson, each day's lesson, is started with a daily review to activate prior knowledge and review from the previous day's lesson. And then the inquiry is introduced through a short 1 to 3 minute video, and these videos are really exciting and engaging for the students. Then the students develop the question to be answered based on the situation presented in the video, and they work together in small groups to complete the inquiry. And then at the end, the class comes together to present, explain, and critique the methods that were used by each group. So some examples of our inquiry-based lessons include a second grade lesson in which students use the concept of odd and even numbers to organize fair kickball games, so this brings in a real-life example. We have a 5th grade lesson, which you'll actually see a snippet of in just a bit, in which students learn to compare decimals to the thousandth place as they plan scuba diving trips. So again, this brings in a real-world example into their math. And then we have an 8th grade lesson in which students graph proportional relationships as students work with the United Nations looking at population growth. And you can see this one works really well with social studies standards too. So we definitely bring in a lot of science and social studies standards into our inquiry-based lessons. So it's a really interdisciplinary experience. So at this point, we're going to have Amy walk us through an example of these lessons in just a bit. But before she does this, we will take some time to answer some of the questions that have come in. So one question, and a lot of people have asked us this question, is can students use the inquiry-based lessons at home? So the answer to that is that students cannot use the inquiry-based lessons at home because they can't access these lessons. They can definitely practice the material from these lessons by doing adaptive practice, but they can't access the lesson itself. The lessons are designed to be done in a classroom setting. We want students working in small groups to complete the inquiry. Again, because we said collaboration is such a huge part of this. So we recommend doing this in the classroom. Another question we have is where can I find the inquiry-based lessons on Front Row's website? And actually, Amy's going to walk us through how to find these lessons and how to use one of these lessons. So let's give it away to Amy.
All right. So in just a second here, I'll switch to a screen share of your teacher dashboard. So when you log into Front Row, what you'll see on your screen, and I'll show you how to navigate to the inquiry-based lessons. So now we'll explore one of Front Row's inquiry-based lessons. To access these lessons, you'll want to log into your teacher dashboard at classroom.frontrowed.com. I'm on the screen right now, and this should look pretty familiar to most of you who use the program. From here, you can navigate to our library of inquiry-based lessons by clicking on the Group Lessons button. Once on the Group Lessons button, you can see the whole library of inquiry-based lessons. There's a lot of ways that you can search through the library. You can browse through all, you can search by grade level, or you can search by topic. So for example, I could type in a topic I want to study and see all the lessons that relate to that. Or I can pick a grade level, for example, 5th grade. Let's pretend that I am a 5th grade teacher and I'm studying place value through decimal comparison with my students. As I'm looking through the 5th grade lessons, it looks like this one might be a good one to do with my class. To be sure, I can read a little bit more about this lesson by clicking on it and reading the lesson overview page. So the lesson overview page gives you a summary of the lesson and its day-to-day objectives, helping you ensure that this is the lesson that you want to teach. Here I can read that students will compare decimals to the thousandths place. I'm also given a brief summary of the context of the lesson. Students are going to be scuba diving in the deepest lakes of 5 different countries. If I scroll down a little further, I can also see the breakdown of the lesson, including daily objectives and how they build on one another. When I feel sure that this is the lesson that I want to teach, I can start the lesson by clicking the red Start Lesson button. So I know prep is a huge thing for teachers, and prepping for an inquiry-based lesson is extremely easy. All you have to do is set up the projector in your room, print out the inquiry sheets, and look through the presentation to familiarize yourself with the inquiry, and that's really it. To print the inquiry sheets, you'll want to click on the inquiry sheet in the resources box next to the presentation. Note that each day of the presentation has an inquiry sheet that is specifically designed to go with that day's inquiry. So to print, you'll just want to click on the inquiry sheet, navigate down to the print button, and make a class set of copies. In this case, you may just want to print one and then make copies in your school office. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate back now to day 1's presentation. So you'll notice here that this presentation has 3 different days. I'm going to go ahead and walk us through day 1, but it's important to note that all daily presentations and all lessons are structured in a similar way. I'm going to go ahead here and click on the day 1 presentation. So we can see here on the title slide that the lesson is titled Scuba Diving in Lakes and Oceans, and this is a lesson that covers comparing decimals. So each lesson starts with a daily review. Day 1 of each lesson starts with a number talk, which is a 5-minute mental math exercise. Some of you may be familiar with this. If you're not, it's a great strategy to try out with your students. For instance, in this lesson's review, it asks students to mentally compute 237 minus 149 and use as many strategies as possible to find a solution. All other days include review questions that go with the concepts covered during the previous day's lesson. So the daily review really helps link each day of the lesson to one another. Students then have an opportunity to share their approaches to the problem. And the daily review is really a great way to launch the lesson, getting students prepared to problem solve and to explore different strategies. Then the lesson really gets started. The next portion is the short video that introduces that day's inquiry. It's really important to play the video at least 2 times so that the kids really understand the context of the problem. The videos are super engaging. Students don't have to do anything but watch, and because they're animated and fun and colorful, students really love watching the videos, and it really gets them excited to solve whatever problem is in front of them. So I'm going to go ahead and play the video for you so that you get a sense of what the inquiry videos look like.
Your family friend recently asked you to go on a scuba diving trip with her. Scuba diving is an activity in which you can breathe underwater. using an oxygen tank and a mask. Many people enjoy scuba diving because it allows them to explore a world that most never get to see, the world under the surface of oceans and lakes. Your friend is on a lifelong quest to go scuba diving in the deepest lake in every country on Earth. Even though she is unable to swim to the bottom of the lake because the pressure difference is too much for a human being to take, she is astounded by how massive these lakes truly are. She hands you a list of the next 5 countries she will be visiting, along with the 2 deepest lakes in those countries and their measurements. She heads out to get you scuba gear, asks you to plan out the trip while she's gone.
All right, so during the video, not only were students extremely engaged in the context of the lesson, but students learned what scuba diving is and why people do it, which might be a completely new concept for them. They're introduced to their friend's goal of scuba diving in the deepest lakes in different countries, and students learn which countries they'll visit and are given 2 lakes in each country in which they could potentially scuba dive. And then the video ends by presenting students with the task of planning out the scuba diving trip. So as you can see, the video is engaging, it presents a problem, and it really motivates students to sort of work together to figure out how to complete the task. So in just that 1-minute video, students are presented with an interesting real-world scenario and a very meaningful task ahead of them. And as I mentioned before, the videos are extremely engaging for students as they learn about new concepts and are challenged with a fun new problem to solve. One thing to note is that students are never told specifically what to do. They're never asked a question or given specific information to use. And so it really presents them with this scenario where they have to pick and choose what information is going to be key for them to answer the inquiry. So after the video, the teacher then passes out the inquiry sheets, and this is where the students show all their work and where they refer to any key information that was stated in the video. I'm going to go ahead and show you the inquiry sheet that goes along with this lesson, so you get an idea of what students have in front of them. So this is the inquiry sheet that I went to print before, and as you can see, the key information for the inquiry is listed at the top. Your friend has invited you to go scuba diving, and her goal is to scuba dive in the deepest lakes in every country. You can also see that the daily objective is listed at the top, and that when I scroll down, there's both a space for the student to write the question that they're trying to answer, as well as a list of the countries that your friend will visit and the depths of the 2 potential lakes in each country where she could scuba dive. So students really have the information here, never told what to do, but instead they develop the question that they're going to answer and use the provided information to solve the inquiry. I'm going to go ahead back here to the presentation. So after passing out the inquiry sheets, students work together to develop the question to answer. And there are guiding questions on the next few slides to help facilitate this problem-solving process. In grades 1 through 5, we give 1 to 2 guiding questions. In the upper grades, we tend to leave it more open-ended, and we really encourage more student discussion there. But so for example, in this developing the question section of the lesson, students are asked, what does your friend want to do? And how can you help your friend plan her trip? In answering these questions, students can then discover the math concepts for themselves, and they really start to understand not only what they need to know, but why they need to know it. And these questions guide students to truly understand and feel invested in the math that needs to be done. So after some time developing the question, students determine the question that they want to answer, and this can be different from group to group. A list of suggested questions is provided for every inquiry lesson. The questions span various ability levels so that students can access the problem and everyone can contribute to the group work. So for example, in this lesson, students could answer, how should you determine which lake to visit in each country? They could also answer, in which lakes should you go scuba diving in each of the 5 countries? Students who finish early and want an additional challenge can move on to the bonus question, and every lesson includes a bonus question. In this case, the bonus question is, of the lakes shown, which lake is the deepest? How many meters deeper is that lake than the next deepest lake listed? After students figure out what question they want to answer, the teacher helps students form groups of 3 to 4. And this is really the optimal group size for Front Row's inquiry-based lessons, as it allows each student to play an active role in the problem solving. And actually, a teacher that sort of piloted these for us said that he tried them out with groups of 6 to 7 because those were the size of his table groups. And he mentioned that the groups were just far too large for really strong group work. So he sort of reiterated our recommendation of 3 to 4 students per group. And students really love getting to work with their classmates. I'm sure you all know anytime they have an opportunity to work with different people and move around the room rather than being confined to their own desk, it makes it a much more engaging situation for them. Each lesson also includes positive group discussion guidelines to facilitate a positive group work environment. So the guidelines that we provide encourage things like participation, respect, focus, turn-taking, and constructive feedback. And you may have some of your own group guidelines in your classroom as well that you can add to this list. At this point, students are well equipped to start solving the inquiry. They have about 10 minutes to work in groups to solve the inquiry lesson, and students are encouraged to draw pictures, use manipulatives, and show their work throughout this process. Students really love having the opportunity to share ideas with their peers and partner together to find a solution to the inquiry. And this sort of collaboration helps students explain their reasoning to one another and validate each other's questions, which just touches on what Sarah was talking about earlier with the building of really positive skills and traits among students. So after some group work time, students present their group's answers and engage in dialogue about different ways to approach the solution. And one group is selected to share in detail how their group solved the inquiry. And there are provided sentence stems to help students express their thoughts clearly and confidently. Once this group has presented, another group or the teacher can supplement what the initial group shared in order to make sure that the correct solution has been shared with the entire class and that everyone understands the correct solution to the inquiry. To close, students reflect on the concepts covered, as well as the inquiry process. There's a reflection slide at the end of every single lesson, which includes at least one review question to prompt students to practice the concepts covered, in this case comparing decimals. For example, question 1 asks which number is greater and asks students to compare 2 different decimals. And question 2 is a word problem that again asks students to compare decimals and then explain their answer. Every reflection slide also includes questions asking how the inquiry process went for the group, what they did best, what they could have improved upon, or what they might have done differently next time. And this is just really important for students to reflect on the process of problem solving and to understand that mistakes are okay and that things don't always go your way, but learning from your experience helps you plan for the next one. After the inquiry, students then have an opportunity to jump on the Front Row practice program and practice skills within the same domain as the lesson. So for example, after this lesson, students are encouraged to get on Front Row and practice in the numbers in base 10 domain using adaptive practice. As you saw before, this inquiry lesson has 3 days. So on the second to last day of each inquiry, students actually practice the specific concept covered through assigned practice.
So on the next day's lesson, students would actually be assigned a specific level where they would go in and practice comparing decimals on the front row practice program. So that's it for the walkthrough of the inquiry-based lessons. I'm going to go ahead and switch back to our question slide and field a couple more questions that were asked along the way. But before I do, I hope that you guys really see the value in inquiry-based lessons and see how they really build a foundational understanding of math concepts and facilitate student engagement. I'm glad we were able to go through an inquiry-based lesson with you all, and hopefully you guys will take an opportunity to try some of these in your classroom. All right, so one question that came in was about how many inquiry-based lessons are available. So something to note is that our inquiry-based lessons, we have a library of over 70 at this point. Some of them are free and some of them are paid. There are at least 4 free lessons at each grade level, but many more at each grade level. Part of the inquiry-based lessons is that you get them with a site-wide subscription to our school edition. So if your entire site buys licenses, you have full access to the library of inquiry-based lessons. As Sarah mentioned when she started the presentation, our goal is to provide the best tools for teachers. And so we offer a number of inquiry-based lessons for free so you can try them out. But we're constantly coming out with more, and our library will continue to grow. We recommend that you try some of the free ones, and if you don't have school edition, this could be a great thing to demonstrate to your administrators and show them why purchasing school edition would be beneficial for your school. One other question that came in is, can I buy a classroom subscription to the inquiry-based lessons? So my guess is this person, their school does not have school edition and they're interested in using the lessons in their own classroom. Unfortunately, at this point, we are only using the inquiry-based lessons. We're only giving them with a school-wide purchase, but there are many ways to sort of try them, show them to your fellow teachers and your administrators so they can see the value in these lessons. And we also have a Teaching Champions program that gives you access to sort of try some of our paid features, even if your administrators might not be on board right away. So you should check that out.
And again, if you guys had any questions that we were unable to get to in this webinar, please just email support@frontrowed.com and we will be sure to get back to you. We really value your feedback and would love to hear back from you about what you loved about the lessons and what you think could make them even better. Thank you so much for participating in our webinar, and thank you for all that you do.